Good morning, folks. I wanted to do a video that I've kind of been promising a few of you, and that video this morning is on bag searches. And I want to talk a little bit about that before we get into the actual bag search, and I'll show you some tools that you can use and how typically I've looked at it. And from my experience, a lot of times I've done it with large groups, conventions, conferences, and then just everyday Sunday. And where I learned to do it was basically with law enforcement, and then also I went to a few places like Disney World, and also some other amusement parks, and kind of watched and asked, talked to their security, asked questions, and did quite a bit of research on it. Talked to various security companies around Ohio too, but basically you have to make a decision, and that decision is ultimately if your church is going to do it or not, if you're going to do a background check as well. And probably the end of this week, next week, I'm going to do a video on background checks to talk about that a little bit more in depth. But as far as bag checks go, ultimately it's your decision to evaluate and discuss it. I mean, for us, we never used to do them and didn't really concern ourselves too much with them until one particular Sunday where I've mentioned before, a gentleman brought in a container that was clear like a milk jug, and it had a clear liquid in it. And we were all kind of like, we really need to do something to check and see what's in that. And also, several of the law enforcement officers that go to our church have been trying in the past, have asked us, when they notice something, they'll say, hey, have you guys looked at that bag at all? Or have you checked it to make sure there's nothing crazy in it if it looks odd? And odd would be like overstuffed, insanely packed and stuff like that. But there was one particular Sunday where I did not get a copy of the schedule, so I didn't know what the service was going to be about. And a family walked into the church, sat about halfway in the sanctuary. All four of them had backpacks. They left their backpacks, which were chock full, and they turned around and walked out. And I always do, in between the Sunday school and the actual service, I always do a loop through the sanctuary once or twice, say hello to people, interact with people, watch people, and review the sanctuary. And so when I came through, I noticed, wow, there's backpacks sitting there and they're stuffed. It just didn't seem right to me. And so the next thing that kind of popped into my head was, well, is it an invasion of privacy to look at them? Yes, but they brought them in, they left them in. So I raised some concern with it, and then found out after talking to the pastor that it was a missionary families, and they had been traveling through town and didn't want to leave the stuff in their car, and so they brought it into the church. So any policy that you have, yes, it's private property. You have the right to pick and choose. I don't pick and choose unless I have a good explanation or a good reason that I could document for pick and choosing. That backpack's overstuffed. Most of our members don't bring in backpacks. I mean, you think of the scenario in your mind, but as far as the actual policy goes, when we do large-scale events where we're open to the public or there's been a direct threat to the church, is when we automatically do them. And if we have a large-scale event, a lot of times we'll set up a table and just start doing them, and people understand and respect that we're doing that. So there's not a lot of discussion in there. But as far as you making the conscious effort and decision to do that, like I say with anything else, it's always good to kind of run it by your leadership and talk to them, so that they don't get a crazy backlash of individuals that are like, well, why did this person check me? Or and just be cordial and explain that you're doing it for safety, and you're doing it for security to help everyone. And it's impossible, especially in a larger church, to get to know everybody. So it's possible maybe they've been attending for a while, but being ready to offer an explanation is always helpful. Usually when I go up to people, and I mentioned this in kind of writing on the Facebook site, but usually what I do is I'll go up to people and I'll say, hi, my name is James. I'm the safety director here at Fellowship Baptist Church. We do random bag checks. Would you mind just showing me real quick what's in your bag there? And I'll pull the person aside. I'll say, hey, can you step over here and just show me what's in your backpack or your messenger bag or briefcase, real quick. And that kind of pulls them out of the limelight, so it's not like we're spotlighting them and saying, hey, this is an issue. But when I get to that point of actually talking to them, I'm listening more than I'm talking. Once they acknowledge and they step to the side, I'll say, can you open these pockets? Can you help me, just pull stuff out and show me what's in there? Then I'm watching their reaction. And when I'm watching their reaction, I'm looking for signs or tells that tell me, okay, this person is really nervous. What are they doing? If they pull out a bottle of liquid, I'll say, hey, can you tell me what's in that? Oh, it's just water. Okay. Or it's coffee. Okay. I'm not gonna, typically I won't do a litmus test or tell them to drink something. I mean, if it was obviously, if there was a poison or weird container that I didn't understand what it was, then I would say, okay, you can't take this into the sanctuary. And some churches don't allow food in them as well. But at that point, I'm kind of interacting with them personally. So I'm not going to do that unless I have somebody else around me, first of all, as a witness, and second, that they know that I'm tied up doing that, and they know that my attention is dedicated to that person in that bag at that particular moment. So what's interesting and why it's important to wait and listen and watch. And you don't have to be talking to do that. Take a moment and just, be silent. And that might seem a little awkward at first, but at the same time, when you're quiet, that awkwardness is going to prompt them, if they're not doing something well or they're hiding something, that awkwardness is going to prompt them to talk, because it just naturally, you have to, you want to have a conversation. If you feel uneasy, you got to talk through it. So it's interesting. You go to an amusement park, for example, and I'll use Disney as an example. Those individuals don't talk. If you walk into like a Disney theme park, say Magic Kingdom, they will check your bags. They will say hello. They'll be polite, but they don't ramble on. So again, that's a sign to me that there's something else going on. And I've had conversations with people where, while they were showing me their bags, it went on to, oh, by the way, I'm carrying a firearm too. And at that point, my conversation shifted to, okay, where is the firearm? Why are you carrying it? The law says that you have to have permission, et cetera, et cetera. So just a little bit of food for thought on that. But I'm going to pause the video for just a second and switch cameras on my phone, and I will get into some examples for you guys. So hang on just a second. All right, so I've got a couple of bags here. You can see I've got a pretty thick backpack. And obviously, to me, if somebody walked in with something this big, a rucksack, I would definitely be asking them about it. But then more common, you have little bags like this, and I think I got this at Walmart for $10 or so, and I usually use it as kind of a on-the-go first aid kit and stuff like that. But usually there's two things that I use when I'm doing a bag search and bag checks, and one accessory that a lot of times I like using. So the first thing is a flashlight, and you can see there's different types of flashlights. I particularly like this one. You can see it's a very inexpensive baton type flashlight, and it has a little bit of heft to it. So if I don't want to be as close, if I'm setting up at a table or something like that, that's a little bit easier to use. And I'll use this as a demonstration. But I can get down in a bag and actually look and see what's down in there. So if there's a shadow or something like that, I can kind of look in and kind of poke through a bag with this. This one works a little better for smaller bags, so you can kind of see. I can kind of get through there and kind of check things out and look. If I don't have anything at all, or I don't have, an option for one of these two, I'll take a small flashlight. And these flashlights are, I think, $5 or $6 on Amazon, and these I think I've actually gotten for $10 or $12 on eBay. So they're not real expensive. They're worth their investment in the money. So this is actually a blue light or black light. So I like using this for searching bags because it kind of gives me a little bit of definition, and it tells me about substances. If there's a chemical or something or a powder that's in there, it'll help me see it. So now, looking down in here, I'll have them open the bag and take the contents out and kind of show me. Or, if we don't have a table or place for them to set contents, I will just have them unzip it for me, and then I'll look in and say, okay, there's a flashlight, there's a pen, some first aid supplies, okay. And then on the front pocket, I'm looking at it, okay. So you've got a pen, notepad, and what's that? Pretty sizable knife. So at that point, if it's a teen event or something like that, I'll say, well, I'm sorry, I'm gonna ask you to take that out. Okay, there's a knife. What do you do with it? Well, you have one or two options, and this is what I will tell them as a teen event. I'll say, okay, one or two options. You can go put this back in your car, or I can hang on to it until the end of the service, until the end of the event or whatever's going on. But I'm not crazy with you taking a knife like that into the service. Now, a lot of times people will be like, well, if it's in my pocket knife. Okay, I get that. Still not real crazy about it, but you kind of have to judge how somebody's responding. Now, I mentioned two things that I always go with and one thing that's optional. I don't have them here, but I also use cut-resistant gloves, and you can get them on Amazon for like $6 or $7 a pair. Not expensive at all. I won't stick my hands in a bag unless I have gloves on, okay? And if I don't have, if I'm setting up to do bag checks, I'll have my thicker cut-resistant gloves that I have. I think I left them at the church, actually, today. But if I don't have those gloves, then I'll have medical gloves. I'll put nitrile or black gloves on. But I'm not going to stick my hands in a bag unless I have gloves on. And that's just to protect me and to protect them from me. So usually when I look at stuff like this, if I don't have gloves, I'll say, can you hold it open? Can you pull stuff out? Can you show me what exactly is going on and what, there's a different flashlight. What all you have in there. and a lot of times too, so gloves and flashlight, those are probably the two main key things. And a lot of times too, what I'll do is I'll pick it up, or if they set it in my hand, as I'm holding it, see I'm kind of squeezing it, I want to make sure that when I squeeze on the outside of the bag, that it's actually telling me what's in it, and that that's lining up, what I feel is lining up with what I see. Okay, because if it's not, then you need to stop and realize, oh, this bag's got about 30 tiny little compartments. There's a compartment in the back. What's in that? Okay, and here we go. I'm not going to go through this one verbatim, but I mean, you can see the same thing. If somebody came in with a backpack like this, I'd have to zip it open and look down and see, okay, well, there's some tools and stuff, and then I would question why there's tools and if the tools are being used for a certain purpose. Okay, so there you have it. The third thing that I usually recommend, and besides the flashlights or having flashlights and gloves, usually the third thing I recommend would be some sort of tag or some sort of labeling system letting everybody know that you checked it. Now, again, most people aren't going to be paying attention to that. What we use is a carnival tag, a carnival wrist tag, and if you go on Amazon, I think you can order like 500 of them for $20, and they'll actually print on it what you want printed, and eBay sells them as well. So for $20, I believe we got 500 of them, and it actually is fluorescent blue, and it actually says, it has our church safety team logo on it, and then it says FBC bag checked. And so if we touch a bag, if we look at a bag, if we go through it, a lot of times we'll grab one of those wristbands, and you can kind of see here, we'll loop it through one of those, someplace that it can be seen easily and visible. And then that way, if we happen to overlap, say somebody else checked a bag and I walked through the sanctuary and I saw a bag, then when I walk up to it, if I see the blue tag, then I'll say, okay, that means that, it's been checked already. I don't need to check it again. Now, there's some, obviously, if you want to be kind of nitpicky about that, there's some opportunities for that, because if, people would say, well, what if the person goes out to their car in between, it being checked and put something else in it? That's true, and that's definitely something you need to keep in mind. But typically, if it was a concern enough to stop the person and check the bag and put a tag on it and everything else, then in most cases, that person, the individual that checked that bag, would report to myself or one of the other leaders and say, hey, I checked a bag, it was this person, give a description, and so we all know. So if for some reason that person started acting weird and walked out to their car or came back in with the bag or cut the tag off or something like that, then we would know, and we would have to just run them through it again and say, hey, I'm sorry, can I see that again? So, in most cases, it takes some time. It's like developing the skill of walking up to somebody and just start randomly talking to them about something. So it's a little bit of a salesman's skill, asking them or saying, hey, and I think that's probably the hardest part, honestly, is being able to stop somebody and pull them aside and say, hey, can you show me what's in that bag, and identifying. So usually what's key with that is identify your position of authority, be cordial, be graceful. You don't have to be rude or mean. Do it in a fashion that, you have somebody else watching but off to the side, so that it's not an embarrassment for them. And, just be observant and realize that they are probably more nervous about it than you are. Kind of like for those of you that are in law enforcement, it's kind of like doing your first traffic stop. You know, the person is probably more nervous than you are walking up to the car and saying, hey, I need to see license and registration. But with that being said and that in mind, hopefully this video is helpful. It definitely went a little bit longer than I thought it would, but I wanted to kind of put it together for you guys today because I've had quite a few people asking me to do a video on it. And as always, I appreciate you watching, and if you have any questions or comments or suggestions for further video, just post them below. Thanks guys, take care, have a great week.